Thank you, and welcome everyone to Bathurst. I trust everyone had a smooth train ride across the CRN yesterday. Can I just get a show of hands who actually came here by train? Excellent, excellent. The reason I say that, if you had any troubles with the train ride in, I'll have a conversation with you. Give us some feedback out when we have the break. We've got the team from the CRN here. They'd love to have the feedback, good, bad or otherwise. I think it's a great time to be in rail. I keep hearing that as I go around to the various presentations. But for me, I've been in the industry for 30 years. It's always been a great time to be in rail, and I think we've got a few people in the room that would agree. There's certainly some interesting projects coming up, which the previous presenters have talked about, which is inland rail, the regional rail fleet, fixing country rail is particularly interesting for us, and all the associated projects and spin-offs that come out of it. I will have to provide one confession. I am a city dweller, so from the Big Smoke, which literally is the Big Smoke in the last couple of days. Like most of you here, we're from, I'm a third generation railie, which I think when you come to a regional centre like this, nearly every second person is somehow related to each other. So I think most people do agree. But I will say, while I am from the Big Smoke, I was born and bred in regional New South Wales, so born in Goulburn, grew up in Taree, and I was lucky to get the tap on the shoulder back in end of '89 to come on board the cadetship program. So I'm pretty pleased to hear from Mark that something like that's starting up again. Excellent. I was asked to talk about the challenges of operating and maintaining a regional rail network. I did ask the team how long have I got, because I could actually prattle onto this stuff all day long, but they said 20 minutes. So this is the abridged version for everyone. So some of the challenges, they're not specifically for the CRN. You'll hear this across all the networks. So if I kick into it. Is that working? Okay, I'll just talk about the CRN, but before I do, a bit of a shout out. This is the New South Wales map. Very similar to the one I sent to Frank earlier, but it's actually a little bit enhanced, so I'm hoping everyone can see that. Not working on one side, it's working on the other side. So firstly, a shout out to for all our rail maintainers in the networks in New South Wales. Firstly, Sydney Trains and the New South Wales Train Link. I'm sure there's a few people here from that group. Just show of hands, just so I get a feel. Sydney Trains, New South Wales Trains. Geez, only a handful. Okay. They're over in the eastern side there in the sort of the orange colours. Then we've got the ARTC network, the interstate, the Hunter network, sort of in the light lavender colour. Team from ARTC, you're out there somewhere. Shout out to everyone there, part of the rail family. And I will welcome on board for the first time for this year. We've got a couple of new kids on the block, which is the Sydney Metro. We've got Newcastle Light Rail, Canberra Light Rail, and not too far off we should have the rest of the Sydney Light Rail network. But I will talk about the CRN, which is Team CRN. So put your hand up, Team CRN. Yeah, good to see, good to see. The CRN, it's operated and maintained by John Holland as the accredited rail operator on behalf of Transport for New South Wales, and has been since the start of 2012. The New South Wales government has invested something like over $1.65 billion into the CRN since that start date. I think Paul might have mentioned a number was slightly higher than that, so it's pretty close. That's been invested into the operation and the assets since that time. And when you look at the map, you go, yep, the network covers a vast area of New South Wales. So for the CRN, we're pretty much all the green lines on the map and a bunch of the red lines. So the green lines are the ones that are currently called operational. The red lines, as Frank talked about, are the ones that are non-operational. We cover a vast area of New South Wales, like I said, and it's very appropriate that the theme for today's conference is Better by a Country Mile, where the distance between the distance is very vast. So, and what I sort of say to people, especially in the metro area, is when you talk the daily commute for our teams, the daily commute out here is literally a day. So when you go and plan to do work somewhere at one end of the network or the other, you make sure you haven't forgotten anything back at the depot. So some good planning needed there. I'll just run through a couple of the quick stats up on the board. Hopefully these show up. And we go on flashing over this side. Just some of the operational stats. There's about 2,500 kilometres of operational line. This is for the railies in the room. There's over 3,100 kilometres of non-operational line. That includes all the lines that actually haven't got rail on them. There's a couple of corridors out there that it's what we call remnant corridors, a few deviated lines. So it's a vast area. 364 turnouts on the main line. That doesn't sound like a lot. We actually don't have anything that's too tricky like you do in some of the Sydney networks. There's no slips, switches, diamonds, any of that. It's just straight out turnouts, which is really good from my perspective. The big one there, 1,100 level crossings, over 1,100 level crossings on operational lines. I'd like to talk to that one a little bit. It's probably one of our bigger risks on the network, as it is on other networks. And only in the last quarter we've had 2 collisions with trains in the last couple of months, one up at Tamworth and one down towards Coolamon. So a key focus for us and for the industry as well. Of those 1,100, there's about less than 8% have actually activated with bells and lights. So just to give you some context. Over on the other side, for the signal people in the room, we might have a few. We've got 2,200 kilometres of train order working. There's about 150 kilometres of rail vehicle detection, mostly on the main west. For the bridges in the room, you can see the stats there, 237 rail bridges. Some of us call them underbridges, of which there's a fairly high percentage which are still timber, which is surprising enough. 337 road bridges, so that's road over rail bridges. Quite a high proportion of those are still timber, and a very high proportion are actually over the ARTC network. So it's a little bit hard to see on the map, but the CRN is actually more than what you can see on this map, that's for sure. There's also a massive land and property portfolio that goes with the current contract. Just a little bit about John Holland Operations and Maintenance. Straight up there in the middle, our purpose, to keep people and freight moving safely in regional New South Wales. That's it. Kicking on. Just a little bit about John Holland. Our teams and depots and offices are spread all over New South Wales. About 85% of our people are actually regional based. We've got a couple of city offices, one in Parramatta, one in Mayfield, where the actual control centre runs from. And most of our people are spread out all over that map of New South Wales, and makes it really efficient for how we actually maintain our track. You can see the various divisions that are within the organisation. What I'll do is I'll switch over now to get into some of the challenges. I like to put this one up. It looks a little bit like a Bunnings commercial. This is on our people side of things. So the challenge isn't necessarily our people. As the previous presenters have talked about, the challenge for the industry at the moment is attracting and retaining people, especially to regional New South Wales. The good thing about having an organisation such as ourselves, Sydney Trains, ARTC, is where we can be the breeding ground for some of these, the roles that we need in rail. But the struggle we have at the moment, there's so many competing jobs going on and projects, and I think we've talked about it before, skill shortages, that the challenge that we really have at the moment is around how do we attract people, how do we get them with the right skill set for the roles that we have. So I think everyone in the room sort of agrees with us there. A little bit of a plug. Yeah, we do have a few vacancies if you're interested, so if you know anyone, but particularly looking for project managers, rail maintainers, but I think you'll hear that across the as you talk to people later in the day. Some of the other challenges, still in the people space. I like to put this photo up. I'm particularly proud of this one. So just one of our drone footages. Anyone recognise where that one's at? Yep, that's Tamworth Viaduct. Some of you may have actually worked on it in your past careers. What what I'd like to use this one as an example of the loss of knowledge in the networks. And as Frank talked about earlier, and even I've said, as the industry has split apart over the years, you tend to find there's a little bit of knowledge loss in about our assets that we have out there. And what some people say is, well, don't dwell on the past, but as Frank actually pointed out, don't forget about the past as well, and understand the history. So this particular asset up in Tamworth, if you know it, is a first-generation wrought iron bridge, a couple of spans there in the middle, built in around 1882, so still in operations today. The rest of the bridge was reconstructed from timber into steel around about 1910 and about 1930. The issue we had in more current years is no one in the industry we'd lost the history of how the structure was built, how it had been load rated. So we had a project recently to look into the capacity of that structure, we had a project to look into the capacity of the structure, and when we actually started to try to find out about what some of the history was, because if some of the people in the industry here know, around about the end of the 90s, I think, there was a lot of issues coming up around these old bridges. A lot of work was put into it. When we actually went out and tried to find the information, it wasn't in a succinct location. So our challenge these days is trying to capture all this information, especially about some of our older assets, and store it in one location so it's in our asset information systems. And for me personally, it's about, I don't want to leave a legacy for a future version of ourselves to not know anything about this structure. So we've now looked at this structure itself, and it's been load rated for and capacity and fatigue for another 100 years, which is excellent. Moving on. This one might cause a bit of a stir. Repetition breeds complacency. And what the hell do you mean by that, Dave? So if you've been a rail maintainer, you know the way we do our work, our T&Ps, they're very repetitive. They go on and on. They every year in, year out, they're very the same. They're very repetitive. I use this one as a bit of an example, but and rail by nature, what we tend to do is we take pride as rail maintainers in being able to detect change, and when you're out there inspecting track, being able to detect change is one of the big things. So I need to use the analogy. If you're at home and your partner and your family might make a change in their own lifestyle, if you walk in the house and don't spot their change, a new hairstyle or something like that, I know my wife gets pretty upset when I walk in, and I keep telling her how well we do in rail in making change, and I tend to miss a couple of things at home. So it's one thing that you need to make sure out here. So we've just got to be careful that in a repetitive nature of the way we go about maintaining work, that we're not complacent in what we're doing. Now, the example I use up there, it's a pretty simple one. That particular sign, I'm not going to go into what the issue is. Some of you will spot it, and you can talk to me outside about what that is. But what this is, the sign's been in place for well over 10 years. We've had train drivers, we've had our own people go past it, and it's there. And there's an issue with it, but it's not until we put a fresh set of eyes looking at what the issue was that we detected there was a problem. It's only minor, but I'll let someone come and talk to me about afterwards what they think the issue is. Moving on. How about the weather we're having? Just think about the conversations you probably started with this morning. Excellent weather here this morning in Bathurst. It's probably a conversation starter. As rail maintainers, though, we do take it to another level. We tend to masquerade as amateur weather forecasters. And I'm sure if you went around the room this morning, anyone here talk about the weather or talk about it yesterday? And then did you have a conversation with a rail maintainer? Because it's just at another level. We believe we're experts. And what we're always keeping an eye out for, especially now coming into the summer, is we're looking for those things like track buckles, We've just come out of a winter where we've been talking about rail breaks. Some of our signal team in the room, they'll be talking about adjusting points and all that sort of thing. So it's been a challenging time. What I've got up there on the slide is the thermometers there are from our remote monitoring systems from last year. If everyone remembers, summer 2018 was pretty warm. We had that heat wave that hit us in about the first week of January, and it was virtually all hands on deck. Those instruments there are showing what the temperature was like. It was around about 10:30 in the morning. It already hit 40 degrees in some parts of the network. It was one of the hottest on summer for the CRN. It's been the hottest on average across most of the CRN, I think, since the start of the contract. So very interesting times. And the last couple of months, the weather's been interesting for the CRN. We've had gale force winds knocking over trees. It was snowing there only a couple of months ago. If you remember the first week of spring this year, we actually had total fire bans. We're putting on speed restrictions for some of our trains. And even up until the last couple of weeks, you've probably seen a few of the fire issues that have been happening around the network. We actually had a fire on the network yesterday, up around between Orange and Dubbo. So interesting times at the moment. So I'll be interested to see how summer 2019 goes for us at the moment. Coming up. I want to talk about seasonal lines and the drought impact. A bit of a conversation starter here when you come out and talk to everyone on the network, talking with the various communities. It's a bit hard to see if this one's not working. I just want to put it in a rail context, what it actually means. So, yep, sure, we have seasonal lines. Primarily, these are our grain lines that they do go with the ebbs and tide of how the season's going. The challenge for us at the moment, though, is keeping those lines at the ready. We typically will have a reduced maintenance inspection frequency for those, but we've got to have them ready at a 72-hour notice at the moment. So I'll just show you won't be able to see it on this side. You can see the crosses up on the screen there. Has that come up? Sorry, crosses up on the screen. That just shows the current impact of the drought. We actually have all of those corridors currently booked out of service, and you can see it certainly is along that sideline there. So out towards the west, that's almost up to date as of yesterday. I'm hoping that there'll be we're hearing there will be some additional grain running on the Hillston line very shortly, and possibly down in the Boree Creek area. But at the moment, it's not looking too good. To put it into context of what the drought impact is, just coming off the Canamble line, this is normally a fairly strong performer for us on the network. Maybe a bit hard to read the graph up there, but the green line at the top was the 2018 harvest. The orange is, that was the 2017 harvest. The orange down the bottom, towards the bottom, is the 2017, and the red right at the very bottom is the current 2019 stats. So virtually gone from about a million and a bit tonnes down to almost nothing. So about 20,000 tonne, which includes the train going in and the train coming out. So just put it in perspective what the drought impact is for rail as well. Just another shot there off the Weemiller line. That's one of our last trains. It's actually a rail set, recycling some rail down to the Junee Griffith corridor, which was mentioned earlier. That's the last train. That was earlier in the year, about February of this year. Prior to that, there was absolutely nothing on the line for about 12 months prior. So it's been a couple of years up on the Weemiller line that hasn't seen a single train service. And you might say, well, Dave, geez, it's tough to maintain must be tough to maintain a line that's actually booked out. Yeah, it is. It's I don't particularly like doing these. I'd rather be seeing trains running out there, as I'm sure all of you would be. But the trick for us at the moment is to do the minimum amount we can do, but have the lines ready to go as soon as trains are ready to run. Just another one. I'm sure Paul's aware of this one. So this is the Kandos line, which had primarily been closed down, but only for the heritage services that run about 4 to 6 times a year. It's actually been reopened as a result of the drought. to run a daily SSR water train between the two mines, which is a fantastic initiative, but as a consequence of the drought. So take the good with the bad, but just to show what the impact is across the network at the moment. For the rail enthusiasts in the room, bit of a challenge at the moment, and I haven't even said the words yet, but track classifications is a bit of a tricky one for us. This is still related to what Frank talked about earlier. Some of the lines are originally pioneer lines, trunk lines, built to different configurations, different standards. This is a bit of a challenge for our modern day operators because they're really saying to us, well, why can't we run that little bit faster or a little bit heavier and a little bit longer on these lines? And when it comes down to it, yep, we have different track classes. You can see the network of 2,500 Ks. That's split around about into fifths almost of different track classes, which is fundamentally built around the configuration of the line, which is basically rail size, ballast depth, sleeper type. We've actually changed our standards to bring that minimum level up. So we have all the rails now continuously welded. Steel sleepers is our minimum. But we also have this thing called a operational concept, which talks about how heavy can you run and how fast can you run on these networks. So the challenge for us is, though, that over time these lines have been progressively upgraded, and they're somewhere in between these track classes. So you might have a track class which is 2, but it's been upgraded to enough that it's not quite a 1, but it's around about a 1.5. So what does that mean? Does that mean we can actually run a little bit quicker and a little bit faster? And that's what was talked about earlier today about some of our lines we've allowed for operational increases, as has other networks done on similar grounds. So, rolling over. I haven't actually said these words before, but I missed it out on it earlier. So, bigger, faster, heavier. They're not lyrics from a Kanye West song, so it's what it's meant to do. I use it in my vernacular as I talk to people, but fundamentally, if I can show it up on the screen, if it works there. The top of the screen is what we currently do today. So, yep, it's a little bit smaller. Locos are shorter. Train lengths are shorter. The bottom one is the concept of going just a little bit faster, a little bit heavier, a little bit longer. I use the term bigger because it's longer consist, but it also, in some cases, we've been able to increase the transit space areas of some of our containers and that, so actually pack on a few extra boxes and that. So I know it's a little bit mesmerising. You can't see it on this side to look at, but that's the fundamental principle: bigger, faster, heavier. That's what we've been trying to do. Some people in the room, you might be hearing about this talked about later. It'll be called capacity improvements, operational enhancements. It just has a bit of a catchy tone to it, so I'm hoping some people will start using it afterwards. And I like to say it's the potential trifecta of operational enhancements. If we can get one or all, great. But even steps of this is pretty good. Incremental increases. Is that 5? Thank you. Okay, I'm getting the hurry along. I'll get in this pretty quickly. Recycling assets can be a bit of a challenge. It's been going on since the start of the railways, forever and a day. We used to recycle footbridges, overbridges, everything through to rail, turnouts. It used to be a bit of a hand-me-down process. You'd get it from the city, it'd come out to the country would pass it on to the heritage mobs, then it'd be come out to fence posts for the farmers. A lot of it still goes on. And fundamentally, the main one we do these days is more around rail and recycling of rail. I've just got some simple sort of slides there just to show you the different rail sizes. I like to say the Class 5 lines, that's got the baby rail, 60 pound as everyone says, or the 30 kg. You can see it increasing in size. It's never that simple, of course. And the challenge for us as maintainers is, well, you're going to get this rail from one of the networks. But what's the condition it's in? How heavy has it been worn? Is it full of defects? What's its wear patterns? Past service life? Defect history? And the reality is when you actually get some of this rail, it comes off a big smorgasbord of all different rail types. So you've got to work out, well, what am I really getting? Where was it manufactured? What's its service life? How does it work in? So The practice will continue forever and a day. I'd certainly encourage it. The projects team that we've got here from the CRN, they'll probably have a bit of a battle with us in terms when it comes to turnouts, but because I don't like putting them together when they're old, that's for sure. That next slide there that's in the middle, that can be some of the outcomes if you put the wrong rail in the wrong location. Maybe a bit hard to see for the people on this side, but over on the other side there, it's got some heavily worn rail that's been transposed into a project. It probably shouldn't have gone in there. Some in the room will probably argue with me and say, yeah, Dave, you could run a train on that. But it really depends on what train are we actually running. So not a good look, not a good outcome, but these are the things you've got to be aware of when you're maintaining a network. Just a couple of quick shots from the Hermidale project that was mentioned earlier this morning. Pretty much most of the materials there have been recycled. The turnouts actually came from a location at Wongarbin out near Dubbo. The rail itself's off the Narromine line. It's got a few defects in it, but perfect for recycling into a siding like Hermidale. So, moving on. Oh, gone too far. The big one for us, and mentioned earlier about heritage, we've got a huge population of ageing assets on non-operational corridors. Some of the grand old structures you see up there, the lines have been shut for that 40, 50 years. It's really about, well, what are we going to do then? What's the strategy in place? Are we going to be repurposing them? They're just a sample of a few. The one down at Narrandera, if you know the Narrandera Viaduct, massive structure with a massive timber structure running on and off. The council down that way have been talking about repurposing that bridge for a cycleway, and we've been talking with them about that. So these are currently one of our biggest challenges at the moment, is just dealing with the population of these assets. How are we going for time? All right. Just want to talk about innovation technology. Yep, some of this can be a challenge at times. Getting the right system for the long term. These are just a couple of the examples of things that we've done on the network on the CRN. The top application there is in our safe working space. So if there's any protection officer, safe working type people in the room here, we fundamentally have replaced the need for the paper-based forms for taking track on-track protection. It's been replaced with the app on your phone. And to date, for this year alone, we've done something like 13,000 transactions have been done via the app, where previously that all used to be done by paper. There was a conversation that used to go on with the control room. That's all stopped now. So some of you might have seen this. It's been running since about 2017. The one screen down the bottom is about one of our new apps that are about to come out for our high rail vehicles that go on track. This is a proximity warning system that runs on an app, and that should be in play over the next month or two. So this basically gives our drivers of our high rail vehicles a warning before they approach the limits of their authority. Because in the past we've seen a few instances where that's not occurred. So skipping over just quickly, a few of the other apps that have been put together. Basically everyone asks these days, can I have an app for that now? So there's just a couple of samples. The one down the bottom might be a bit of an interesting one for some of the railies in the room. If you remember the old track and gradient diagrams, we've currently got in development, we're trying to work out a way of getting that, so we're just running off a live data stream into one of our systems. A bit of a work in progress, but and there's a whole bunch of other inspection apps and that. How are we going for time? Okay. Wrap up, okay. All right, I was going to show a video. I was going to talk about Junee to Griffith, just to show a bit of the video, but I'll end up skipping over that one. Thanks, Mark. Just quickly, it was mentioned earlier, this is about a $60 million project that was part of the Fixing Country Rail program that's been secured. It's fundamentally an upgrade of the Junee to Griffith line from, if you saw earlier on the map, it's currently somewhere in a class between Class 2 and Class 3 track classifications. We're limited to about 20.25 tonnes at 60 kilometres an hour. We're fundamentally going to re-rail about 130 kilometres of this line, upgrade some bridges, a few turnouts, and that'll bring the capacity to bigger, faster, heavier on that corridor. to around 25 tonnes at about 50 kilometres an hour, and that's stepped all the way through. So it's a good reuse, good project, good reuse of recycled materials, good initiative, and will be a good project for that community in that area. I'll skip over the video because we're out of time. Just want to thank everyone, and I will say that the CRN shares a number of similar challenges to other rail networks in the network and in the city, in the other regional areas, and jointly we can all come up with some solutions to some of those challenges together. So appreciate that. Thanks for your time.